In 1268, the Aequids and their army of light declared a great purification for the kingdom of Halych-Voln, which was within the Volksreich. Kaiser Erhard II, called the Holy, responded in turn with an impressive show of military prowess against their terrifying horde. Raising two armies of 23,000 men each, some mercenaries and some not, Kaiser Erhard the Holy marched into the lands of those terrible pagans instead of await their terrible onslaught. First, the land was harsh, and the ability to feed the armies strained under the sheer distance that the realm of the Aequids was away from the Volksreich. At first, they turned to raiding, but there weren't enough settled towns to sustain them on frigid, flat, open plain. However, upon splitting into 4 smaller armies in order to try and conserve resources, they overcame their accursed attrition. Around the time this decision was made, an 11,000-man horde, led by the Archegos Tangri himself, came thundering across the plains. Unable to escape their speed, these rushed men formed up and tried to fight, but they were devastated. After 7,000 men taken into the grave by hunger or disease, the Army of Light took 8,000 more Volkish soldiers with them at the Battle of the Plains. The Army of Light then pushed forward, piercing the Volkish rearguard, beginning to raid and terrorize the eastern lands of the Volksreich, reducing whole cities to rubble. Their savagery was a kind of unknown to the people of Central Europe, and to the Aequids nothing was sacred to them here. They dealt not in slaves, and they dealt only in death. Certain cities were lost to time in these raids, their former locations not exactly known even centuries later. In 1270, the second set of armies headed east and did far better against the Army of Light. With a wise set of tactics and fighting in their own land, the Volkish army was able to defeat and push back the Manichaean army into their own strange lands. A smaller force was detached and sent to go and attack the seat of the Archegos, and so they did. By the time they had crossed half the world, more than half of them had died in the conditions there, but nonetheless they were able to siege their pathetic earth forts without much of a fight, and without his horses, the terrible Archegos of the Manichaeans was nothing more than a common warlord of the steppe. The Volkish force entered and forced him to surrender, scarring his image forevermore. This great purification had thus failed as well, and ultimately ended in 1273. In 1279, Kiev, having relegated Holy Kiev to the island of Crimea, decided to declare war upon the original progenitor of the Albigensian Church, the Volksreich. They thought that, fresh off the heels of a devastating war, now would be the time to strike against the great behemoth. Sensing an opportunity, the Magyarország decided to join in on the conflict against the Volksreich. This was a war that many thought unwinnable, though it began luckily with the butchering at Ast. This battle was characterized by an outnumbered and foolhardy Kievan force being laid low by a Volkish army, still fully prepared for war. This result was a Volkish victory, and the Kievan king Braj Batomil was captured during the retreat. He surrendered almost immediately afterwards, thus ending the Kievan War, which lasted only a single year. The Magyarország did not pursue the conflict any longer, not confident in the results of a regular war against the Volksreich. Meanwhile, in 1280, the dancing plague began in the northern provinces of the Volksreich. People would spontaneously begin to dance and would not stop until they passed out or even died. Those who saw them often felt compelled to join in the dancing, meeting with similar fates. It would end as soon as it came, and its cause was never found. This was assumed by many to be witchcraft. By 1285, Kiev had turned their attention east to the other realm fresh from war. In this way, Kiev had become more of a major power, picking off provinces from the weakened Aequids, who were now beset on all sides by ever-encroaching invaders who smelled the blood in the water. Kaiser Erhard decided to humble Kiev once more, taking some land from them that was well within his territory, declaring the Second Kievan War. On the 12th of April, 1286, the Kaiser's daughter and personally favored heir, Ermengarde, died of the measles at the age of 30, leaving her brother and Erhard's eldest child, Tanist Karl, to inherit the throne upon the Kaiser's death. Erhard the Holy and Tanist Karl had a troubled relationship, as Erhard loved his daughter with everything he had, though this only came at the direct expense of Karl. He never got much contact with his father as a child, and as a grown man only ever fought with him. Meanwhile, though Kiev was indeed a dawning power and their armies were strong, their fortifications were not. With the aid of expendable mercenaries, tens of thousands were thrown at their ill-made castle walls, which crumbled beneath their collective blows. The Second Kievan War was won later in 1286, and the Kievans turned their focus east once again, hoping to be left to their devices this time. By 1288, Thessaloniki was thriving, but beneath a tyrant Basilessa by the name of Adriana Musuros, a Sunni Muslim who married a Mongol and held power by right of her husband's violent raiding men. Constantinople was in the hands of a woman who abandoned her very own culture, which built that city. Upon this opportunity, the Magyarország invaded, taking much land from the Muslim queen. On the 6th of January 1290, Kaiser Erhard the Holy died of natural causes at the age of 58. Always a patient man who never lost his temper, he would be missed sorely. This was, of course, how he was seen in public. Kaiser Karl rose to the throne at the age of 31. As sure as he was to impress priests with his knowledge of the Bible, he was doubly sure to be a good Kaiser. Kaiser Karl would marry immediately upon ascending to the throne. After his coronation, a revolt league declared war upon Karl, wishing to overthrow what they saw as an awkward and bookish Kaiser, and lower the crown authority by force. In 1290, the Albigensian Church, perhaps in a move to regain favor with a Kaiser they thought they could manipulate, declared the late Kaiser Erhard Saint Erhard the Holy. Little did they know, this only sowed enmity in his heart against the Church that wasn't there before. In 1292, the Dancing Plague returned, again beginning in the north. A hard-won victory over the Revolt League came in August of that year, proving Kaiser Karl could wield the power afforded to him as monarch adeptly. In 1292, the Pope declared a crusade against Thessaloniki, exploiting the fact that they were ruled over by a heathen monarch. On the 21st of December, 1292, King Potemkin Blatomil of Kiev declared himself Tsar of the Russian Empire. In 1293, Patriarch Chuno declared an Albigensian crusade upon the Aequids, which few people had interest in. In 1299, Kaiser Karl's wife, Kunigund, was killed by angry peasants while acting as his steward and tax collector. This sent him spiraling into a deep depression, which would stay with him, in some form, for the rest of his life. By August of that year, both the Crusades for Thessaloniki and the Aequids had failed, perhaps meaning that the Pope had played his hand too early. These realms, seemingly on the way out, still had some fight in them yet. In 1301, Marco Polo finally returned from his journeys in the Far East, publishing his works in order to provide a rare glimpse into the world beyond Europe. By 1303, the Orthodox branch of Christianity was nearly dead, with only the middling kingdom of Moreos maintaining its original Greek form, the rest of its former footholds riddled by heresies and rival faiths. By 1304, the once fractured Gallic region was now only divided between two major powers, the Kingdom of Vexin in the north and the Empire of Aquitania in the south. Meanwhile, throughout the early 1300s, sporadic wars would be fought with the Patriarchate and always end with a Volkish victory. Despite the state of affairs, they left the war without any significant action being taken either way, as Kaiser Karl was unsure if bringing them back into the fold would actually reduce their annual struggle against the crown. On the 4th of May, 1305, the Magyarország Empire declared war upon the Volksreich with their army of almost 90,000 men. As part of the Magyar campaign to conquer Italy, their massive army was fighting for Ferrara, a single province in Italy which would connect the territories they already held there. Not feeling entirely confident about this with his 65,000-man army, Kaiser Karl decided to surrender them the province, much to the chagrin of certain factions within the court who were itching to hire mercenaries with the absolute fortune of ducats they were doing nothing with. But Kaiser Karl had other plans in mind for that money. In November, Kaiser Karl shocked the realm and redeemed himself in the eyes of the court as he embarked on a campaign of grand conquest, assaulting the weak and crumbling kingdoms of Spoleto, Rossello, Nimes, and that old enemy of the Volksreich, Lombardia, that were being quickly left behind in Europe that was becoming a place of empires. In 1309, the Aequids declared a great purification for Vepsanwa once again, desperate to get an edge over the Russians in the west and the Mongols in the east. In 1310, with the war in Lombardia unexpectedly drawn out, Vexin declared war upon the Volksreich, seizing their opportunity. The province of Chur was wrenched from the Lombardian grip by 1311, freeing up resources to go and punish Vexin. With the help of somewhere around 30,000 mercenaries, Vexin was beaten down and peace was restored to the realm. By 1312, Spoleto, once on its way out, was able to seize the remaining land that Lombardia was able to hold on to after suffering such severe damage. By September, Kaiser Karl the Chaste realized that he had gone all this time without sire and heir. On the 7th, he went to the orphanage in Schwarzburg and adopted a boy of 5 by the name of Guntram, whose parents died of consumption. He had a poor relationship with this boy and was a distant father, an inheritance from his own father's aggressive parenting. On the 9th of March, 1316, Kaiser Karl the Chaste died of natural causes at the age of 57. His adoptive son, Kaiser Guntram, ascended to the throne at the age of 8 years old, left in the capable hands of the regent and council. In June, Thessaloniki's collapsed after the Magyar Arszag took Constantinople, resulting in the exile of their Basilius, Belisarius the Depraved, who ousted the Muslim queen but was not much better to the people than she was. The Magyars would soon set their sights upon the Muslim Greeks in the Empire of Lakandu, who held Anatolia since the second fall of the Byzantines. This mirrored the trend in the west, where the Empire of Aquitania continued its reconquête, causing the long-stable Yusufids to splinter into many kingdoms. In 1319, the Great Purification for Vipsanma failed. As went their holy war, so went the last hopes for their realm.